Break the Ice podcast is presented by Superfood. Superfood Performance Nutrition has made a name for itself by feeding athletic organizations like the Washington Capitals both on and off the ice. If you have a high-performance team that needs fueling, check out superfd.com to learn more. Hey everyone, Mike Vogel here for WashingtonCaps.com. Welcome to yet another edition of Break the Ice, joined today by Caps head coach Spencer Carbery as the Caps just weeks, days away, I guess, now from taking the ice at the beginning of training camp in preparation for the 23-24 season. Spencer, I guess it's almost been about 90 days, almost 3 months exactly since you were named as the team's head coach. What's the summer been like for you as far as checking boxes, getting the family moved in, just all the things that you needed to do? Are you all set and ready to go? How did those 90 days play out for you?
Early on, it was a lot. There was a lot coming at myself job-wise, requirements-wise for things with the team, media obligation, all that stuff early on, and then not to mention the family part of it, of moving and doing that whole thing. Once post-draft, post-development camp was a really good week for us because a lot of our staff got together and we were in person and got to go over a lot of preparation stuff as we were going to go our separate ways for the next month and a bit. We were able to dial some things in that are going to be really, really important in the next couple of weeks. So the way I would describe it is it was a lot early on, immediately after being named head coach, and then the last 4 weeks have been able to settle in and start to, transition, move the family down. We got all that stuff organized, schools, all the logistical family stuff, and then also be able to really take a deep breath and dial into the preparation component for training camp, our group, some line all that type of stuff we're able to tackle as things slowed down over the last 4 weeks.
You able to feel the excitement kind of building?
Yeah,
now?
Big time. And especially I feel like this as a coach, when you start getting into the rink and slowly but surely one more player comes, two more players come forward. And this, when I first was here, there was two. Mm-hmm. It was Joe Snively and John Carlson and Alexiev. I should say it actually started as Alexiev and Carlson, and then Snives comes in. And now all of a sudden you walk by and there's 12 skaters out there, so you can feel it coming, to your point. It's
a great time of year, it for sure is. So let's go back into the history of your career a little bit, and we'll start with the playing career. It's kind of interesting to me that you started playing in the BCHL for the Cowichan. Is that the Cowichan Valley Capitals.
Yeah.
And for an ex-Capital, Greg Adams was the head coach of that team, which is wild to me. But you grew up, I know you were born in Victoria. Did you grow up there as well?
I did. Grew up there, and always, funny story, always wanted to play. There's a junior A team, bitter rival of the Cowichan Valley Capitals in Victoria. They were back then called the Victoria Salsa. They're now the Victoria Grizzlies.
I like salsa.
Yeah, they were there because the owner of Taco Time, he owned it, Victoria Salsa. I always wanted to play for my hometown team, Junior A, the Victoria Salsa. Never could make it, and then I went up to Cowichan Valley my third year trying out. I said, forget it. I'm not going to try out for the Salsa again. I know how this story ends. So Greg Adams was the owner of the Cowichan Valley Capitals, owns a bunch of has a construction company, owns some Tim Hortons up there, is from that area, Cowichan Valley. Duncan is the town name. Went there. Greg was the owner of the team and said, you know what? I'm going to coach this team. I'm going to coach. And so this was his first year coaching. And so Greg saw me play him and liked the style of play that I brought, and I made the team, and then played the year in Cowichan Valley for Greg Adams.
And Victoria is kind of a a jumping off point really for the game itself. I mean, Dick Patrick's family started that Pacific Coast Hockey League more than 100 years ago. There was a team in Victoria. There's one of the first indoor rinks ever was built in Victoria, and there's a plaque there to this day commemorating that. And I mean, Matty Irwin's hometown is always a big place for us.
Yeah, Stanley Cup champions too. I always remember that as a kid, looking at it. I go, Victoria, Stanley Cup champion. Hold on,
how can that be?
They won the Stanley Cup way back.
So, and you spent another year in that league before you went off to University of Alaska Anchorage, which Jay Beagle showed up there a couple of years later. But interesting to me, like you spent a season there, and that team did not have a very good year. And
you read up on that, hey?
Yeah. I found it fascinating, too, that the coach is a guy named Jim Hill, I think.
John Hill.
And his, delving back into his background, and he had a long and good coaching career, but he actually was a teammate of John Tortorella in something called the Atlantic Coast Hockey League in the mid-1980s.
I didn't know that.
So that's kind of a wild thing. They played for the Virginia Lancers, again, to kind of bring it back home here, so that's kind of a weird, fluky little thing.
I didn't know that. Huh.
But what was it that about that 1 year in Anchorage that had you moving to Wisconsin after that?
Well, that was an interesting year. We so I'll say a few things. It was the worst recorded season in the history of NCAA hockey. Yeah. We won our first game of the season.
My God, no.
Won our first game of the season and didn't win for 35 straight.
I knew you had one win. I didn't realize it was opening night.
It was the first. We were 1-0, ready to take the world on. Oh. And so great experience. A, living up in Alaska Anchorage. B, and a lot of people don't know this, Alaska Anchorage, the program has sort of dropped off a little bit, but back then it played in the WCHA. Mm-hmm. And this was hands down the best conference in college hockey. You're talking about University of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Denver, Colorado College. Colorado College was the best team we put. And it was like Thomas Vanek, Joe Pavelski, Zach Parise, it was a gauntlet. Minnesota Duluth was excellent. Michigan Tech, Minnesota State Mankato. Mm. So it was a gauntlet of a conference, but also exposing me to a very, very high level of play. It didn't work out there. The season, me personally, it just was a really, really tough year. And I had been recruited by St. Norbert heavily through my junior career in Cowichan Valley, like you touched on, and in Penticton. So I just felt like Division III, and back then, this is before the transfer portal and all that stuff. When you're in Division I, if you transferred to Division I, you had to sit out a year. You had to redshirt. And I just was already an older freshman. I said, you know what, I want to keep playing hockey. I love the game. I'm going to change directions here. This Division III team was heavily recruiting me. It seemed like a great program. The coach was excellent. Loved all the things he talked about the program. And so I decided to go there and play right away. And one of the best decisions I ever made in my life.
When you look back on that one season now and maybe just in the way John Hill handled that anything that you learned from that situation? Because obviously nobody wants that.
Yeah, I learned a lot, and I think I would tell this to John today, and I actually bumped into him because he's in Columbus's organization as a scout, and yes. I just can't even imagine as a coach going through the emotions of that. And I remember there were so many emotions of that year because there's so much negativity and loss, and you'd go to practice and you didn't enjoy because you knew. And then we tried to bring it back up and be real positive through the year. You know, we'd lost 12-14 at this point, and then and then it goes back, and it just and then you couple that with the fact of Alaska that time of year, you go to class pitch dark. You get out of class, pitch dark.
Yeah.
So it was just, I learned a ton about not only myself, but also coaching and handling losing and going through certain situations in a year where things don't go your way. So I did take a lot from that year.
And then you go to St. Norbert, which is in De Pere. And for me, that growing up in the Midwest, like St. Norbert is famous for being the training camp of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
I think since the days of Vince Lombardi, I'm pretty sure he's the guy that moved their training camp there, and I think it's been there pretty much, pandemic notwithstanding. I think it's been there ever since.
You're right, I think.
And that sort of championship osmosis has got to still be in the air there. What was that experience like? And I also noticed that there's a fair amount of BC guys and Canadians that were recruited to that program.
Yeah, and that's what St. Norbert had the unique ability as a private institution to be able to offer some Canadian players some financial aid in going to a private school, St. Norbert. And that's why, part of the reason, I should say, why they've been able to recruit Saskatchewan players, British Columbia, Alberta, and do a really, really good job. And you're right, you touch on the Green Bay Packer portion of St. Norbert, which not a lot of people know. De Pere, close to Green Bay, but there are so many ties to the Green Bay Packers. Red Batty is their equipment manager. Has been there for years. He's from just a huge hockey guy, so he would get us involved with the Packers. I remember meeting Bart Starr and Brett Favre. And you go to games and you feel the mystique of the Packers, and they would stay in the dorms, like you said, in training camp. They would stay at the St. Norbert dorms and practice. So you're right. You that's the original title town, the Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we did get exposed to that a lot. And the program was great, small private school, but also just a great hockey program, really well run. By Coach Tim Coughlin, who's been there for years and has just done an exceptional job with that hockey program.
So what was your degree in? And that's a degree that, in a perfect world, you'll never even need to use. And were you expecting to use it when you got it?
I absolutely was expecting to use it, and I would disagree with you. I use it every day. I use that degree every single day, and it... I
mean, to get paid to use it.
Yes.
But I know what you're saying.
I got a business administration degree, and I learned a ton. And, it was interesting because it's such a small school. I remember being in Alaska at Anchorage, and you're in these big auditoriums, and you're just going through college, right? It was like the typical college. You sit there, you do your midterm, you do your final. This was a whole different experience. This was in a 20-person class. This is assignments are due every week. This is attendance is taken.
Nowhere to hide.
Yes, and you're called on, and you're expected to. And so I learned a lot and was not ready for that, but soon became. I said, okay, I got to pick up my bootstraps here. Like, this is the real deal, and I've got to make sure that I'm putting in adequate work so that I can graduate and get a college degree. So I learned a ton in my class. I still go back to like corporate finance stuff, like managerial economics stuff that I was a business major. So I did take a lot away from my 3 years at St. Norbert scholastically.
I think you're more invested too as an upperclassman, right? When you're just jumping into it as a freshman, you're kind of just trying to feel your way around. You were probably more mature by the time you got through it all. And so then you finish that up and you start playing in the now defunct Central Hockey League for the Tulsa Oilers, and that Tulsa has a hockey history going back to the original Central League. I think George McPhee started his pro career there too at some point back in the 80s. But that league, when you were in it, was interesting to me. Like, it had guys like Jim Wiley and Terry Ruskowski, Killer Kaminsky. It had some former NHL players with some cachet who were coaching. But it didn't seem to have much of a footprint. So how did you get from graduation to instead of going into the business world to landing in Tulsa?
Well, I knew I still wanted to play desperately, and as your Division III career ends and you're going, okay, there's only so many places, there's only so many pro jobs. And I'll tell you a story. I signed that summer, not with Tulsa, in the United Hockey League, which was another now defunct league, for the Chicago Hounds. It was their inaugural season. They only ended up playing one season, I think. It was the Sears Center. They built this arena in Hoffman Estates, Chicago. They were going to bring this United League team there. And I go there, and the naive pro hockey player who would, okay, great, I got this contract, I'm on the team. I get let go after training camp, after going through exhibition games and that. And then that was eye-opening, because there's so many different occurrences in your life where you're like, this could have gone left, this could have gone right. And I went back to St. Norbert and was like, whew, okay. I'm trying to find, and at that time, Vogue's trying to get on with the team at the beginning of the season. Everybody's full. You're like, I might be done here. And I got a break. In Tulsa, one of the Czech players, his immigration had not been filed yet, or it hadn't gone through, so he wasn't able to play. So I'll always remember Mike Wiggins was his name. I played against him. He played for the University of Wisconsin Superior, good player. He vouched for me. I didn't know him at all. We had just played against each other. St. Norbert and Superior are bitter rivals. Yeah. And he vouched for me he told me this later, to the coach in Tulsa, and said, get this Carbery guy, bring him in. He's a good player. He can help us. And that's how I got that's how I made my way to Tulsa after being let go. And he tells a funny story. This is like, because I had a really good year that year in Tulsa. I was their rookie of the year. Like, it took me a little bit to get going, but I found my way and ended up having a pretty good year. But he goes, I saw you the first practice, and I was so embarrassed. I guess I didn't look very good coming in. And he goes, I told the coach I vouched for you, and all the teams like, who's this guy you vouched for? But it ended up working out.
So he had some vouching regrets initially.
Yeah, wow. He did. Thankfully, I backed it up later on in the year, but.
And then from there, you went into the ECHL next year, which I guess at that time was seen as a higher league. And that year was kind of, you got the tour of Northern California there, Stockton, Bakersfield, and I think there was another one.
Fresno,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like, where you're getting a taste, but you're kind of hopping around?
Yeah. So that's where, now I'm starting to get a little bit older here, because you got to, the NHL dream. I still wanted to play in a higher level. I had a good year in the Central League. I said, I believe I can play in the East Coast League. Like, that's what I wanted to prove. That was my goal that year. So I signed in Bakersfield, and again, didn't go as planned early on. Our team didn't perform very well, and it just didn't end up working out. I got traded, I think maybe 20 games into Stockton. Very similar. So same division. You're playing each other all the time. This is back in the East Coast League when they had that California division. There's tons of teams. So go to Stockton, and really it was Edmonton's affiliate at the time, and there's a ton of contracted players, and didn't play much. Our team wasn't very good, and that was kind of the point. And this is another one of those moments of where Stockton doesn't even trade me. Now they just say, I got called into the office and they said, Carbs, we're gonna release you. And I said, okay, that's probably it. I'm 25 at this time. I would guess somewhere around there. And I go, that's probably all she wrote for my professional hockey career. This year has not gone the way I had drawn it up, and this is probably a sign. So what ends up happening is that day when I got released, I got a phone call from Matt Thomas. And Matt Thomas was the head coach in Fresno, him and Ryan Mouginel.
Oh, yeah.
And they're both in Providence now. And so Matty Thomas Tito, he goes, if we claim you, will you come to Fresno? And I said, yeah, I'll come. And they said, okay, well, we're not going to be able to get you, because the way it worked, waiver priority, they go, Pensacola's in last place. They're going to claim you. But we've got a deal worked out with Pensacola. They're going to claim you and trade you to us. in Fresno. So sure enough, and I'm thinking, okay, well, let's just finish out the year. Let's earn the rest of my salary, and we can go home and regroup. So Pensacola claims me, trades me to Fresno. I drive an hour and a half from Stockton to Fresno, and again, another situation that it couldn't have worked out better. It was a great environment for me. Their team was great, fit in really well. Some friends from that team that I still call friends to this day.
Awesome.
On that team on Fresno, and played well, fit right in, and ended up going back there the following year with Matty Thomas and Ryan Mouginel.
And I guess it was midway through that next season, did they deal you to South Carolina, and that's kind of where everything really...
No, the story only gets weirder from here. But
well, please do tell. That's what we're here for.
We so came back to Fresno, had a good finish to that year. They were going to build a real good team in Fresno. So came back, I was part of that team, and we were good. We had a tough team. We had skill. We were affiliated with the Blackhawks. Peter MacArthur was down. Mike Raja. We had a really good team. And so fast forward the story, we get to December 22nd, last game before the Christmas break. And I hadn't heard any of this. Some players said they had heard about it or rumblings about it. It caught me completely off guard because I was loving life, enjoying coming to the rink every day. Our team was in first place. Matty Thomas gives his pre-game speech and says, "This is the last game we're going to play together. Our team is folding after tonight."
Oh, my God.
And I remember just sitting there like, no. What? We're folding. The owners are closing the doors. It's over. We're folding after tonight. So we play the game, and now we go on Christmas break. And so this was another point to kind of going back to the I'm like, okay, this is it. This is it. Enough. I've played my last pro game. I thought I was in a great spot. I thought we were going to win a championship. This is a
you
sign.
were going to win one, actually.
And So what happened there is we all the players on the team became free agents mid-season. And
which must have set off quite a fierce little
bidding
war.
Even with the coaches, Matt Thomas, I believe, got hired in Stockton immediately. When the team, they let their coach go, he gets hired, he brings some guys to Stockton. And I honestly, my fiance at the time, Casey, and I drove, and we were like, that's done. We're going to go to British Columbia. We go to BC, and then we said, okay, well, we'll go and start our lives in South Carolina. She was going to get into, was a communications major. She was going to find work. My mom was down there. I was going to get into the financial industry. We were going to move on. This is December 28th. So we actually flew back to Fresno. We're ready to go. I get a phone call. A bunch of teams have been calling saying, would you like to come? And I said, no, thanks. Cincinnati, a lot of the teams in the ECHL. I got a phone call from Jared Bednar. And so Bedsy, he goes in his persuasive voice, I hear you're coming out this way. And I said, yeah, I'm he said, okay, well, do you have any interest in playing? I said, no, some teams have been calling. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to start my life post-hockey. And he said, okay, well, you're already coming out here. What do you think about coming out and playing with us for a couple of weeks? We're short a few guys. You can come play. It'll be a good transition for you. Just a couple of weeks. You earn some extra bucks. And so he convinces me. He goes, the only catch is you got to be here in 2 days. We play... Who do we play? Charlotte, I think, on this is on a Monday. He's like, we need you here for Wednesday night. So we're going Fresno, California, Charleston, South Carolina, like booking it across the country. My fiance and I made it there, played, and again, just a really, really good fit. Another one of those things, those moments in your life that take place that transforms and just takes you in a direction. It was one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
You guys won the cup that year.
Yeah, we did. It was an unbelievable ride. Like, great group of guys. Met Bedsy, phenomenal coach. The organization, the Zucker family. It just, there's so many things that just fell into place from there.
And then the next season was finally your last season. And I guess by that point, going back to a conversation you and I had maybe 5 years ago, you were kind of expecting to come back and play yet again. And then I think it was Cale McLean kind of said, hey, what would you think about maybe joining me behind the bench?
Yeah, and that maybe I haven't said this a lot, but maybe I owe a lot more than I do to Cale, not for giving me the opportunity. Obviously, very, very gracious for him even thinking about, but maybe seeing something. I don't know of Carbs might.
Yeah.
There might be something there as a coach and seeing that and coming to me with that opportunity to be the assistant coach and not necessarily play anymore. And again, him taking a chance on me and letting me become the assistant coach of his team and learning under him, like that's another thing of that a lot of people ask the question and it's come up more often now since Ryan Warsofsky and the South Carolina and the things like there was just such a lineage of passing down how you do things in the ECHL and how we do things in the South Carolina Stingrays organization, how we treat people, how we recruit, how we work, the hours in our day, how we break down film, and you learn it. And if you want to be successful, this is how you do it. And that's what Cale showed me. That's what Bedsy showed Cale. And you just knew you had to do this and you had to live up to this standard or you weren't going to be successful.
How meaningful is it now looking back to see that guy, the guy who brought you to South Carolina is now the first guy in history to win a Kelly Cup, a Calder Cup, and a Stanley Cup, and now you're kind of in position to start following in those footsteps.
It makes the hair stand up on my arms, like to hear that, and he's so deserving and so humble, down to earth. It couldn't happen to a better person, and it's just been such a pleasure to watch and see those moments and be able to, for him, especially. I mean, you look at the start to his NHL career in Colorado that year.
Yeah,
and I mean, you imagine, and it's funny. I was watching the Netflix Swamp Kings.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, and it's a lot of people talk about this, like usually some real difficult situations, if in the moment it's like, oh boy, I'm not sure I'm going to get through this, and then it ends up Bedsy situation, Urban Meyer situation. First, he goes, I'm one game, I'm a loss against, I can't remember who it was, South Carolina or whatever it was, of like, and even him as a coach going like, I might be done here. And next thing you know, multiple national championships, I should say. And same thing for Beds. And so that's where you're just so happy for him because you can imagine as a coach being in those shoes and going through that heartache and all the grueling and the negativity in that, and then to come out on the other end and be a Stanley Cup champion, that's amazing.
And you only spent that one season as an assistant there, and then you were elevated to the head gig in Charleston, and 5 seasons, improved winning percentage each season, a couple of nice playoff runs there at the end, got to the final one year. How did that progression set you up for leaving the organization and checking a couple of boxes in Saginaw and Providence?
I felt like kind of to the point about the winning percentage, I genuinely felt, looking back, is I got better as a coach. Like I think about my first year as a head coach and I go, gosh, oh my gosh, what was I thinking here? Like I'll look at I remember doing what a poor decision or whatever it was, strategy standpoint, player recruitment standpoint, GM standpoint. I genuinely felt by the time at the end of my time in South Carolina, I was 100 times better coach than when I started. So I think that I just continued to learn. I wanted to get better. I wanted to put the work in. I wanted to correct mistakes that I made. I wanted to learn from them and knew that I didn't have the answers and needed to seek out help, and wasn't too proud to say, hey guys, that's on me. That's a mistake. Won't happen again. I'll learn from it. And by the end of the time in South Carolina, we had a couple really good runs. Felt like we had two sort of championship level, even the 3 championship level teams. It's a hard league because of the call ups, and you just don't know what your roster is going to look like. And there's no excuses, but we had some good runs there, and I felt like I was ready for the next challenge. I wanted to challenge myself personally to what can you, whether it's the American League, a different league. It ended up being the Ontario Hockey League, but I was really, really chomping at the bit. And sometimes it doesn't happen like that. I was very, very fortunate to get that opportunity, because a lot of people, you can say I want to take on the next challenge, but that doesn't come. That opportunity doesn't come, and I was again fortunate that Dave Drinkle, the GM in Saginaw, sort of identified me in South Carolina. Had followed my career a little bit and took a chance on me, and having never played in the Ontario Hockey League, not born in Ontario, not a Toronto guy, to come up there and coach that franchise in the Major Junior Ontario Hockey League.
Was it something that you always envisioned as being a short-term thing? Because it was just one season.
No, and I to this day still feel really bad about how that happened. I committed to that organization because they knew it had been a real tough period for them, and it had never gotten any traction. And I came in there and knew that it was going to be a process to build this thing up. I think when I got in there and really peeled back the onion, I think the whole organization, including Dave, ownership, was like, okay, whoa, we got to get this down to the studs. This has to be completely rebuilt, which I was on board for. But in that league, it's not a 1 or 2 year. Like, this is a 4-year project, which I wasn't opposed to. That's okay. I was like, let's roll our sleeves up. And now Chris Lazary was our assistant coach there. He's the head coach to this day. That program has been turned around. They're hosting the Memorial Cup next year. That's cool. And so after that first year, it was just like, okay, this is going to be a long process. And I had worked with the Boston Bruins for a couple years. The Capitals actually, and Hershey, changed their affiliation from South Carolina to Reading. Right. For a couple years. It was the year after Gruby. I had Gruby as a first-year pro. His second year, he went to Reading. And even, I think it might have even been parts of his third year, but his second year for sure was in Reading because the affiliation got moved to Reading. Stan Gallia was there, some other Capital prospects. So during that time, South Carolina grabbed a new affiliation with the Boston Bruins. And so at this time, this is when Butch Cassidy was the head coach in Providence, Kevin Dean, and Don Sweeney was the assistant GM. Peter Chiarelli was the GM. And so in those 2 years, we were affiliated with Boston. So Don Sweeney was my contact there. Butch Cassidy was the head coach, would go up for camps, got to know them fairly well, and developed some of their players. Tommy Cross, Tyler Randell, Adam Morrison was one of their goalies. So long story short, sorry, long-winded here, but the point of what I'm getting at is that relationship and seeing how they operated and seeing the Bruins organization when the opportunity came up in Providence. That was a really, really difficult decision. And I just went, it was one of those where you stay in Saginaw, it's a great situation, potentially go to Providence. And it was just one of those, like, it wasn't a clear cut, like, do this, do that. It was just a leap of faith that I said, you know what, I'm going to go back into pro hockey and work in Providence under Jay Leach in the Bruins organization. But a really, really, really difficult decision that I felt really badly because I did make a commitment, and, you know, things come up and coaches move, but I'm usually like, I want to be a man of my word. Now that's something that I want to be remembered for, and not fulfilling a commitment and not following through with something, a vision that I felt like I could help that organization. I didn't take that lightly.
But that makes sense, though, that would be something that you would need to do is serve as an assistant at a higher level, and I'm sure they're understanding. I think
after a few years,
they've got it. They've got to it's got to sting for sure. But I think there's got to be an understanding that the guys have to be able to improve their lot in life and in their career. So, and I think again, looking back on it now, it's got to have been a big plus, and there has to have been a lot of value in stepping in. And I had forgotten about the whole Reading dalliance with the Caps there for a couple of years, and I mean they even got to the Kelly Cup final. But just seeing how things are done in another organization, and you had that opportunity as well in Toronto. But so you've actually spent time, multiple seasons in 3 different NHL organizations as you're taking off here this fall to start your NHL head coaching career. But what did you learn from those couple seasons in Boston and those couple seasons in Toronto and all the time that you've spent? Like, how well do you feel like having 3 different sort of visions or different or altered kind of viewpoints helps you as you're embarking upon this biggest step here?
You're spot on to being able. So here's what I would say is being able to see the game through a different lens, a different organization, a different appreciation maybe for a player or a style of play, and meet all of the people and pick their brains. And because that's where I feel like I'm so blessed I get to pick the brain of Jay Leach and learn the way that he sees the game, and talk to Jamie Langenbrunner about player development and who they draft and why they draft him and what they see, and then see what it is to be a Bruin and the style of play and the characteristics that you have to bring as a player in order to wear the spoked bean, all of that stuff. You take all these little things, Kim Bramville, the skills coach for the Boston Bruins, and watching the way that he does individual skill drills and go, darn, that's pretty smart, of the way to teach a young defenseman to do. And so all those thousands of experiences you go through in a season and learn about the foundational things like you're touching on of what the Boston Bruins, and then be able to take that. And I get to take that to her. And now I grabbed all the good stuff that I really liked, and then I bring that to Hershey. And that's part of the identity of our group, is part of what you grab from all these different spots. And that's where I feel like, again, I'm so blessed to have been able to be around Butch Cassidy and see like that, and grab that, like that. Oh, Barry Trotz, Todd Rear, like all these little things that I learned along the way that now are in my tool belt that will be part of the way that the Washington Capitals play this year. Some of the stuff that I took from here, some from here that I believe in, some from Sheldon Keefe and the Toronto Maple Leafs and the way that they play, I think are great, innovative ideas and need to be part of the way, my philosophy and the way that we're going to play the game. That's what it's all about. And that's why, again, I know I'm being a dead horse, but that's where I feel like I've been very, very blessed to have, like you said, been in these different organizations to gain this knowledge.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about how Jared had set things up in South Carolina, where this is how we do things. This is how we review film. This is how we treat people. All that stuff. But now you're getting the benefit of a couple of original 6 teams where it's so ingrained in the fabric, and then, like you say, you're allowed to pick and choose what to hold, what to let go of. And you come into Hershey, and you're back in the Caps organization, kind of where it all started for you, and I mean, you did a great job there for 3 years, but man, those 3 years were so difficult in terms of everything that was going on outside, and what was it like for you to have to deal with that, and knowing that every guy was going through that, and every guy's career was kind of being put on hold and kind of up in the air, and there was so much uncertainty. There was so much. I mean, we were all dealing with it.
Yeah.
But how much did that sort of creep into your job description where you're dealing with it too, but now you kind of got to, build these guys up and help them get through it. You're not going to be able to have a playoff experience this year or next year. What was that like for you when you look back on it now?
It to be honest with you, I never, because of what was going on in the world, it was just really, it was hard because a lot of now looking back, you go like, geez, now it's easier to say. To go, I really wish we had 2 playoff runs to be able, but in the moment, you're like, hockey's secondary right now, and this is like players' careers, my career, everybody's career is irrelevant right now. So it was hard in the moment to be really negative or down or frustrated by what was going on in the world. Looking back, I'm like, gosh, those were 2 really, really good teams. And the thing that I think about the most with that group, and this is why I'm so proud of what they were able to do this year, is when we first came in as a staff to Hershey, that team was very, very young. And so it was that year where I want to say there was so Garrett Pilon was a rookie, Beck Malenstein, Juuso Aikinen, Max Kammerer, Joe was Lucas was a second year. I'm trying to think that there was Hampus Gustafson, Mason Mitchell. The list goes on. Shane Gersich was a rookie. So there were a lot of growing pains. Like that was a difficult year. And if you remember that first year in Hershey, like we were in last place at Christmas. And looking back now, you're like, Beck and Peels and all these first-year guys, it's a tough league.
It is. Like,
it is a tough league, and so you're coming out of major junior, 20 years old. It takes a bit of time, and to see them grow and their commitment level and who they became in just that 1 year to now, like we went on that run in the second half of the year, end up making the playoffs, upset Bridgeport in the first round, and then knowing how much they were going to grow the following year to where we were when everything shut down, and then the third year, and then for them to win it this year. But to your original question, the third year is when really stuff, it was like, okay, this is the season, and that's where I felt like our team showed its most resiliency and mental toughness, is because that year was a challenge, right? With the testing, with the limited opponents. We did not know if there was going to be playoffs, and we were playing 3 teams the entire year. And most of the teams in North America, I'll be honest with you, when you looked around the American League and minor leagues, like it's just kind of playing games, right? To play games, to stay in shape. Our group, it wasn't like that to them. They were genuinely, and we had this saying at the beginning of the year when we first got together, if you sort of mapped out the days, just the regular season, because we didn't know if there was going to be playoffs. So it was literally 100 days from day one to the end of the thing. So we had 100 days together. We had been off for 300 and whatever. It was 100 days together, and we made a commitment. We're making the most of these 100 days. And it wasn't about winning games or being the best team. It was about, we're going to take, all of us players want to get to the National Hockey League. Why not take advantage of these 100 days? We got 100 days to work, to practice, to get smarter, to get quicker, to get better. Let's take advantage of it as opposed to just going through the motions. And so our guys, to their credit, like they were a determined group for 100 days and played great that year. We're the best team in the league. Now, I get it. A lot of coaches and people will go like, well, yeah, Carbs, you're playing 3 teams and it's there's a taxi squad and all that stuff, which is totally fair. But I just know what our group did and what our guys put into that year and the mental toughness they showed going through those circumstances of that COVID year in the American League with potentially not having playoffs, which didn't take place. And I give those guys a lot of credit.
I look at guys like Lucas Johansson, Beck Malenstein, Riley Sutter. Yeah. You look at their games played total in the American League, and they're essentially the equivalent of maybe 2 full seasons. So these guys have been pro for some of them for like 5 years now, but they've really only played I mean, they're kind of the equivalent of going into that last year of their entry-level deal in terms of development. I feel like really kind of across the board here, we're at a point where you kind of have to grade on a COVID curve a little bit as far as these guys' development goes. And I got to think that there's some hidden gems out there, not just here, but around the league, guys who maybe would be further along or could be further along with a little push or the right opportunity. How do you get? I mean, do you agree with that assessment? And because I saw like what I saw from Riley Sutter in that playoff run, like this is a guy who looks like he could play here at some point.
Different player. I couldn't agree more. And I do think there's something to be said for that. Even in the drafting part of think about some of those young kids that it was their draft year. They didn't play a game. They didn't play games. So now you're going to probably see some players that potentially were drafted later in that draft that all of a sudden are, that because they weren't able to play that entire season. And I think it goes for exactly to your point of some of the lack of game action and lack of playing playoffs for 2 straight years. Like there's no question. Some players, obviously, there's exceptions to every rule that it didn't affect them or they were able to just hit the ground running. But for a lot of players, they need games. They need reps. And you're seeing that a little bit to your point.
So let's look at this team, the 23-24 Caps. To me, it's interesting that this is a team that for the first time in 9 seasons or whatever it is that they didn't make the playoffs. And look, halfway through the season, they were on pace for 100 points. It was kind of the second half that sent them careening off the track there. So obviously, it's not a position that they're used to being in. But typically, when there's a coaching change and when there's a team falls short of its goals, there's some change in the team. And this team is essentially as it was. I mean, sure, there were some guys moved out at the deadline, but it's essentially as it was when they finished on April 13th. Coaching staff, more turnover in the coaching staff than any time in the last decade. But I like the fact. I mean, some people will look and say, well, you got the oldest team, you got the youngest coaching staff. I actually like that. I think that's what these guys were kind of crying out for. To me, just the conversations that I had with them toward the back half of the season, it sounded like they were looking for a breath of fresh air. How do you guys provide that? And how important is it for you guys as a group to find some cohesion, the coaching staff, and just in your daily workflow and being able to hit the ground running? Because I feel like chemistry is important amongst you guys every bit as much as it is on the ice with the players.
I agree, and that's where these next couple of weeks for us as a staff will, because it'll be the first time our entire staff is together in the coach's office working before we ramp up camp. So we've got a good couple of weeks where we'll get right into the thick of things and start to create those relationships or further those relationships, create that chemistry like you talk about, because I absolutely agree. Our staff and the environment that we help create is what permeates through our locker room. And it's what we give off on the bus, in the locker room, on the ice for practice, in our pregame skates. And it's important. And I can just speak to who I am as a coach, and I won't, the differences or whatever it might be of what this group needs versus what it had or whatever it might be is that's just who I am as a coach. I'm a high energy, enthusiastic, love to come to the rink and tackle the day. And I'm also a fierce competitor, an intense guy. And I am extremely competitive, but also understand at the same time the next day is another opportunity and how we figuring out the next day. And it's not going to it's going to come from an enthusiasm and an energy perspective as opposed to a poor me and negativity standpoint.
You mentioned what the team needs. And I got to think that what the team and what individual players need at this level is vastly different from what they need at the ECHL and the OHL and the AHL levels. What have you seen from your 2 years working with Sheldon in Toronto? Mm-hmm. What is the biggest difference in terms of what these guys are looking for from you versus what you've needed to provide at those lower levels, working your way up the ladder?
Biggest number one is being conscious of workload and being conscious of schedule. And those sort of go hand in hand, but it just, the schedule is so demanding that practice length, reps, day to day, even your meeting length, like that stuff all has to be monitored and is just nowhere even near replicated in the minor leagues or in junior hockey. And so that's something that over the last couple of years I've been able to learn, and our team's in a little bit different makeup than Toronto is, but still at the same time there's some effective ways to communicate message, teach, even though you're not taking reps in practice, or even though it's not a 45-minute practice and it's 25 minutes. You just have to get good at being able to coach in those moments and find different ways to get, like I said, your message across, or create teaching situations where you're not having to drag guys in. Or here's a prime example of where it's so rare, and I found this interesting over the last couple of years, and it's what I've gotten used to, is you play so many games in the National Hockey League coming off a day off. Very rare in the minor leagues. Like you're never off before you play, but that's so you've got to get really good with your process of, we play Friday night, Saturday's off, and we're going to play Sunday. So what does your coaching staff do on that Saturday away from the rink? Everybody needs their time, so that you come back Sunday and you're prepared for a different opponent, but you're also learning from Friday. So there's some ways to do that in an effective way without having to spend 45 minutes in a video room, or go out and practice and do a morning skate, even though you may do it. That there's just little things that go into that you learn because of the schedule and the timing in the National Hockey League.
And especially with an older team, how important is the two-way communication and bringing the leadership group in and making sure that these guys feel like they're invested in everything that's going on and they have a say, and that, they're not just being told what to do or
absolutely. That's a really, really important component, because there's this hand, right, is where we need to play at an exceptionally high pace, right? And I've talked about that, and our players will be in agreement and they'll know. And so how do we do that while also managing workload, minutes, and that's the trick, right? We need to find that sweet spot of where we're able to play at a level like this for 60 minutes, and some of this stuff will come into our depth and why we'll be a 4-line team and all this different stuff. But how do we get to this to where we can play shift after shift, and we're able to get up and down, change, bang, we can make decisions, pucks moving, we're playing at a high pace, but we're also, our workload is manageable, and we're not having to kill guys to where now we're putting ourselves in jeopardy in terms of injury prevent, all of that stuff, which is really, really important. So that's my job, is to find that common ground of that sweet spot with our training staff as well, and our leadership group having a say in that.
Going into what we hope will be the last season of a flat salary cap here, it's kind of important, and just organizationally too, to be able to bring along some younger players and to find some spots for them in a lineup and to work them in. And I feel like that's important for every team anyways, but maybe for this team this year, and also an older team with a ton of back-to-backs this year, good to have some young legs in the lineup. But you're in a unique position of having coached a bunch of these guys before. How important is it to integrate some of that youth into the lineup, especially early in the season, where they can kind of lift up the rest of the boats with those young legs?
Yeah, it's critical in the salary cap era, having that relief from entry level players being able to come into your lineup and play, and that's that's something that we will emphasize, and having those relationships with a lot of our younger players, that the expectations aren't going to change. The rope, obviously, I understand young players, and I've talked about this before. They're going to make mistakes. They need opportunity and time, and they will develop, and I've seen that firsthand. But they also know my level of expectations, and they know and have seen me coach, and they know what are those non-negotiables and how dialed in they need to be with their structure and what a track looks like. And if Carbs doesn't see that, they're like, oh, they know, long way of putting, they know the level of expectation. And so I think that helps with these guys being able to come in, feel a little bit more comfortable, and like you said, be able to contribute, because it's not, the NHL isn't a league where you can just, keep going out there and making mistakes and we'll just keep suffering the repercussions. That's not how it works, and that isn't the way that it'll work with our young players as well. They know that there's a level of play that they have to live up to, and we're going to help them get there, and they're going to have plenty of opportunity, but they know there's a level of play that we expect, and that's what we're going to push them to get to as quickly as possible, so that they can, like you said, lift the boat and help pull the rope and early in the season and alleviate minutes and be able to be a 4-line team and a 3D pair team. All of that stuff is going to be so important for our group.
And the other side of that coin is, obviously, as we've talked about a few times, you've got the oldest team in the league, and you got some guys whose, salary figures are pretty high, and they're maybe having a harder time producing to that level. A couple of those guys are still young enough, and I'm talking about Evgeny Kuznetsov and Anthony Mantha, where, sometimes at some point everybody's career kind of takes that downward turn. But these guys are young enough that you could look at last year and say, well, this guy's young enough that he can rebound. What goes into being the guy that can help push them towards that? And, how do you manage those personalities to get the most out of those guys?
So I would say this, the first thing I think that I've always approached it in whether it's a team or an individual is gather information first. So that's in two ways of where they've been, what's made them successful in the past, find out from teammates, other coaches, management, scouts, whatever it is, find out what's made them successful in the past, or what have they looked like when they've been at their best. Now watch the film. And so see the good of when they were on their game, at the top of their game. What do they look like? What do they do? What are the areas that they most positively affect the game? Now look at the last 20 games, whatever it is, from the previous season that they played in. What doesn't look the same? What's different about this player than what I saw when he was clicking on all cylinders? And then so try to identify those and details inside of their game that potentially I can help them with. Or what about this here? Let's take a look at this and put the work in to find little tweaks or little areas of your positioning here. You're getting your puck off a little bit slower or whatever it is. And then it's my job to help them see those things and then give them confidence and get them back to where they were. And does that always work out? No. And there's no magic pixie dust.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I understand it's my job to get the most out of Anthony Mantha and help him get there. It's not like, okay, go, good luck.
Yeah.
You need to do X, Y, Z. I have to help him get there and have to help identify the situations where he's doing a great job and where he's not. And it won't be different for any other player of trying to help them reach their full potential. And I with the two specific players that you touched on, I have great belief that they're going to come in, be highly motivated. They want to do well. They want to be the best. They want to win games and help the Washington Capitals win a ton of games this year. So with that, I got to know that's a great situation. So two highly motivated guys that I think are going to come in and do a great job for our group, and I'm going to do everything I can to help them.
Okay, last thing before we let you go, and this will be a bit of a two-parter. Just listening to you talk here today, and I can tell like the competitive fire that burns inside you, and obviously that's clearly the case. But 10 the top 10 coaches in NHL history in terms of games coached, half of them, 5 of the 10, never played in the NHL. Got to get an opportunity, got to start somewhere. Listening to you talk about your first year in South Carolina and how you look back on that now and kind of cringe a little bit. What goes into you still developing and going up against the best in the business and growing your game like the way players grow their games over the course of a season and over the course of a career? That's the one part of it. The other part of it is listening to you talk about the evolution of the game over the 15 years or so that you've been coaching in it. How do you kind of merge your development as a coach with the changing game and maybe try to get out on front of that curve and sort of lead in terms of innovation? And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to put any pressure on you here, but and I know that's a hard thing. That's what everybody's looking to do. Everybody wants to find. But I feel like too often in this game, it's like, okay, what did the last team do that won the cup? And let's sort of pattern ourselves after that instead of trying to maybe figure out. And maybe there's some failure involved here in trying to figure out where the game's going next. And we try to lead that, and it doesn't work out. And maybe that's too big of a bridge to broach. But just your thoughts on those two things and how they diverge a little bit.
It's a really interesting point, and the game has certainly changed. And so and I'm trying to be at the front of that, right? As a coach, is you're trying to find new ideas, new ways. Where is this game going, and how can you be ahead of that curve as opposed to playing catch up? And I think I do look at things. And try to find ways, and I'm always scouring. And I think I've been exposed to a few of those in some of the organizations that I've been in. And I think about this that is interesting. And I feel like the NFL is usually on the front of a lot of this stuff because of the money at stake, because of the league, because of the viewers, all of that stuff. Is they recognized two things a few years ago, call it 10 years ago. What fans want to see: point production, touchdowns, scoring. So the NFL's not, they from a defensive league that, and don't get me, like defense still wins championships, and you better be able to defend. The Tampa Bay Lightning can defend the heck out of you. The Las Vegas was an excellent defensive team. Okay, so I'm not. But what I am saying is that's where the game is going, right? The NFL understands that points, touchdowns, Patrick Mahomes, that's money. That is where this game is going. The other thing is your superstar players, and they are the other thing that drives. And so what do they do to the quarterback? They change the whole rules, right? Because they understand, they know that if these guys – and so I bring those things up of just as a young coach – you're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but you need to try to be looking in all different areas of where's the game going? Can we do anything different offensively? Are we using the whole offensive zone? Can we get the puck to here and there? So that absolutely, you're spot on with something that I try to look for. And now there's a line to that. You got to be careful, and you can't go crazy with that because, like I said, defending is still such an important part, but there are areas where we will try to be cutting edge with the way that we play in a lot of offensive areas. And the other point, what was it about? Coaching. And so I would say that because it sparked something in my head, because a lot of people probably, young coach, going to take time, and totally fair experience. I will never sell short experience, but I feel like, and this goes to any walk of life, business, coaching, the second you're not learning and getting better and evolving as a coach or as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, you're losing a step.
As a human.
If you think you've got it all figured out, and so I'm the first to tell you that I am learning all the time, taking different ideas, trying to find new ways to get better. And whether you're young or old, I'll be the same way at 55, hopefully doing the same thing, trying to find ways and not I just feel like when you get stuck in your own vision and your own, nope, this is the way things need to be done. I'm not taking input. I don't want to see the way I do it this way. I think that's you're just losing a little bit. There's great ideas from great people all around you every day.
Well, I hope you're still here when you're 55, and I hope you're here continuously when you're 55, and I hope I'm not. And I hope you're the last of the 11 coaches that I've worked alongside here in Washington, and I really appreciate your time. I've enjoyed the hell out of this conversation. Hopefully, you folks out there in listener land will find it the same way. Thanks, Spencer. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Superfood Performance Nutrition fuels the Washington Capitals players and staff on and off the ice. Each bite is energy-packed, highly nutritious, and engineered to boost recovery time. When they're not feeding pro athletes, Superfood is bringing the same high-quality nutrition to offices nationwide through their flagship corporate meal program, Simply Lunch. So if you have a high-performance team that needs fueling, check out superfd.com to learn more.